All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for Weather Where You Are. I'm First Alert Meteorologist Courteney Jacobazzi, and today we are talking about the anatomy of a hurricane and how it really determines impacts. And we saw that very clearly with what is now Tropical Storm Debby. Of course, it made landfall as a hurricane, and the difference between our impact here at home versus just a couple of 100 miles to our east along the coast in parts of East Georgia and, of course, the Carolinas. You remember back to Monday, we had a beautiful day, had a lot of sunshine, a nice breeze, but the coast was getting slammed with heavy rain and severe weather. So I want to talk about that and talk about what the forecast is to come for the coast, and not only the coast here in Georgia, but coastal Carolina. Thankfully, Debby is becoming less and less of a story across the southeast, and that will only continue to be the case as we head into the end of the week. And I think a lot of people will be very glad to see the storm go, and it will continue to weaken, so not expected to have a huge impact on the northeast. So here's a look at kind of what the anatomy of a hurricane entails. You hear us talk about the right side of storms, that's kind of the dirty side of the storm, for a lack of better word, but there's a reason for that. So the way that tropical systems rotate, they are an area of low pressure at their core. They rotate counterclockwise, and so you see them spin again kind of from right to left. And so what that does is as all of the rain bands that carry the heavy downpours spin around that storm, that front right quadrant, that top right quadrant, that's where you'll get the maximum impact. You have the heavy rain because those outer rain bands are pulling in all that tropical moisture, but you also get that threat for tornadoes. So as you have the spin happening and it interacts with still land, so say this is the peninsula of Florida, and that's where you'll get that significant storm surge. So for instance, as Debby, here's the Big Bend region of Florida, as Debby moved inland, the front side brought the severe weather and that potential for a very heavy rain, but as the storm moved inland, it pushed in all that water on the backside, increasing that storm surge threat. So a lot of times, especially along coastal areas, when storms move inland, they'll get that first round from the heavy rain and the severe weather and the gusty wind, but then it's not over. As the backside moves in, you'll get that secondary push of water, which could create that storm surge threat, which storm surge essentially is the ocean coming to you, which is one of the most dangerous parts about hurricanes. Not necessarily the severe weather, but the flooding and the storm surge are the two most dangerous aspects. And of course, the wind just kind of adds to all of that. When you have major hurricanes with catastrophic winds, that of course creates a whole different beast. But in the terms of Category 1 hurricanes, a lot of homes nowadays are built to withstand that, and the water really is a huge issue because your homes can only withstand so much water when it rushes inland. Now when it comes to the bottom left quadrant, that is the weakest, but of course it's still dangerous. You'll still get a little bit of a storm surge threat. You still have the really high wind, especially closer to that center of circulation where the wind is the greatest. And then on that front right quadrant, that bottom right quadrant there, you get the significant wind threat because you just have, essentially think about being on the back of a roller coaster. You know how you get pulled along really fast on the back of a roller coaster, you almost get whipped around. That's essentially what that quadrant is. It's getting pulled by those top ends of those rain bands, and it's essentially like being on the back end of a roller coaster if you're in that quadrant. So that's where you'll get that significant wind threat. So here's a look at where Tropical Storm Debby stands as of right now. This is the 11 a.m. advisory. Winds of 60 miles per hour, so it did strengthen, which we were expecting because it's now over the open waters of the Atlantic, and specifically in this region you have the Gulf Stream, which is a very warm kind of band of water that sits along the Atlantic coastline, and what it's doing is bringing those heavy rain bands in that front right quadrant. That's where you'll typically see the tornado warning. So for places like North Carolina, they are under a severe threat today for that potential for some isolated tornadoes. You have that weakest quadrant that's kind of pulling all that rain and any kind of storm surge threat offshore, so that's good news, but you're getting that storm surge threat, that very heavy rain threat, and that wind threat all along those top two quadrants there. And as that storm moves inland, that will continue to increase the rain threat, the wind threat, the flooding threat, and the severe weather threat for the Carolinas. So notice the flash flood risk today, the bullseye for it in the Myrtle Beach area, so northern South Carolina into the Wilmington area. So South Carolina into central North Carolina is where the greatest threat is for flash flooding today, with that lower risk for parts of Georgia now. So again, our threat's starting to diminish as the storm is starting to move away, and we're now on that weaker side of the storm, being that back left quadrant there, that bottom quadrant of the storm. So here's a look at the rainfall totals estimated. Notice Savannah, maybe 4/10 of additional rainfall. Some spots, if they get caught under one of the heavier tropical downpours that develops around the storm, maybe close to an inch of rain. But the flooding threat's pretty much coming to an end. The water's expected to start to recede over the next couple of days, but that's going to take a while. They picked up a lot of rain in a short period of time, so flash flooding is pretty much all along the coast right now. So that'll take a few days. But notice a place like Myrtle Beach all the way up into New Bern, Wilmington, expected to pick up over 1/2 inch of rain. And this might even be on the conservative side. They might pick up over a foot of rain in the coming 24 to 48 hours, this going through Friday, which will only add to the flooding. They're expecting rainfall totals after this whole event kind of wraps up, upwards of 25 to 30 inches of rain, which they haven't seen since Florence several years ago. So this weekend, as the storm continues to move north, I mentioned that, behind these tropical systems, so you have the quadrants, which as the storm is active and currently in your area, that's what you expect, again, with that kind of front top quadrant there, that front right quadrant being the most dangerous, but all of them come with their own flaws, essentially, for lack of better words. But as these storms move north of you, or if they are east of you, very much like we were. So a tropical system is an area of low pressure, and low pressure air is allowed to rise, which allows all those thunderstorms and all the rain to develop, versus when you're underneath an area of high pressure, usually that kind of creates a force field for us, and that's where you get sinking air, and that's usually when you get really beautiful but also hot weather. So just like your body, just like when your body's trying to maintain a balance, the earth and the atmosphere is always trying to maintain balance as well. So when you have an area of low pressure and rising air, you're naturally going to have an area of higher pressure and sinking air right behind it. So when you have something like a tropical system and you have that air rising within, I'm actually going to go back to the storm so that you can kind of see what I'm talking about. It'll be easier. So you have all the rain and storms within where Debby is, but then here at home, even when Debby was along the coast, what did we have? A lot of sunshine. Of course, when Debby moved a little further closer to Savannah area, we got that cloud shield from the storm, but on the backside, you're getting sinking air, which gives us those beautiful blue skies. So on Monday, when the storm was making landfall and moving into South Georgia, and we were getting kind of on the west side of this storm, while air was rising in the center, to maintain balance, it sinks on the outside, on that back side of the storm. So we were getting all that beautiful sunshine. So really, depending on where you are, if that storm would have shifted maybe 200 miles to the west, it would have been a completely different story for us here in North Georgia. But because we ended up on that west side of the storm, that's where the sinking air happens. And so we got all of that sunshine. Now, let's take you forward in time as the storm continues to move north. And we not only have these, what we call subsidence on the backside, so the sinking air on the backside of this storm, but we have a cold front move through. Both of these things are going to drop our humidity, which is going to be fantastic. So you get all the rain and storms when the hurricane's physically happening and moving through, especially on the right side. But then when it goes north, it changes the forecast completely, because you'll be on the backside where that sinking air happens, and it brings much nicer weather, which is always so welcomed. So while tropical systems are beasts within themselves, they can actually bring some really beautiful weather behind them, which is just the most insane thing. Tropical systems, hurricanes, tropical storms are just the most fascinating. They're my favorite things to study. They're my favorite things to talk about, because their anatomy is just so incredible, and how they can bring so much damage but also bring beautiful weather. If you saw photos from Steinhatchee, Florida, but then you saw photos that same day from Panama City, that was kind of equivalent to Savannah to here. It was a beautiful day at the beach in Panama City, but just a couple hours drive to the east, they were getting tropical storm, hurricane force winds, storm surge flooding. So really, just depending on where you are in relation to a hurricane or a tropical storm makes a huge difference in your impact, because you do get that subsidence, that sinking air on the far western side of it, as the earth is just trying to maintain its balance, while you have this very strong area of low pressure within the center of hurricanes and tropical systems. So good morning. I see some people checking in. Hello, everyone. So again, what that's going to do for us as it moves north, kind of continuing on here, now that you understand what's going to happen on the backside of this low, it's going to bring in some drier air, and for us that means lower humidity. That'll start to usher in on Saturday afternoon, and then really take over on Sunday. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't look like the humidity is going to drop in quite the drastic manner that we originally expected, but It's summer, so any drop in humidity here in North Georgia, you'll notice. And so it'll be a lot more comfortable through the day on Sunday. So I definitely implore you to get out and enjoy the day on Sunday. Make some outdoor plans because we don't get days like this very often, especially in this time of year. And because of the side that we're on, just a couple 100 miles makes a worlds of difference when it comes to our impacts. So that's why we've been so lucky that all that moisture getting pulled and wrapped around that low that, again, flows counterclockwise, bringing the severe weather because of things like wind shear and friction and storm surge because it's just rushing all this water on shore as it moves forward, versus us, where we're on the side that's trying to help balance everything out, where you're getting that sinking air and that beautiful weather and lots of sunshine and ultimately some lower humidity as we head into the weekend as it continues to move off to the northeast. All right, everyone, thanks so much for joining me for Weather Where You Are. I hope you learned something today. We do this every day at 11:30 as long as we don't have anything crazy and breaking happening. So just be sure that you tune in every day at 11:30 and nerd out with us about the weather a little bit. Until next time, I hope you make it a really, really great day.